Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Michaelanius. Today's episode is going to be about something that I used to see all the time on Facebook, and it used to piss me off to no end every single time because it was just people being in their own bubble and not understanding that they had made themselves a bubble and were inside it. So I'm sure everybody remembers the news coverage of the Paris terrorist attacks. You know, there was 130 people dead, Bataclan Theatre, all the rest of it, and the media was just covering it non-stop. And you had all of the same people who were, wringing their hands and being like, but what about the other countries? How come we only care when it's the Western countries that get attacked? And they're just generally having a whinge. Be like, oh, I'm sure no one cares about Iraq. And it's like, yeah, you got a perfectly good point. There's a lot of terrorist attacks elsewhere in the world, and no one gives a shit. Do you want to know why? Because it's not newsworthy. Newsworthiness, there's two parts to it. It's like, how big was the effect, and how common was that event? If something has, let's take for example, the sun rising. Really big effect on the world. Really consistently happens though. Do we report on the sun rising? Well, unless you have an Instagram. I see a lot of people with Instagram and Facebook posts about the sun rising and setting, but not newsworthy. Doesn't get covered. Bureau of Meteorology releases the estimated time that the sun will rise, but doesn't get news coverage because it happens literally every day. What would happen if the sun didn't rise? That would get covered because it would be absolutely catastrophic. It would be the end of the world if the sun didn't rise. We'd all be dead, like the last person, dying because just the end of the world has arrived because there's no sun anymore. That person, it was like his dying breath would be like, Facebook post, no sun. Bam, that would be it. That would be the last thing that happens from human beings, would be reporting the news that there's no sun. So, Paris attacks. Massive amounts of coverage. Because 130 people getting killed in a terrorist attack is not common in a Western country. It's not common at all. It doesn't happen that frequently. Therefore, it's newsworthy. Do you want to know where you can get, 100 people dying in terrorist attacks really frequently? The Middle East. It barely gets covered. There's another reason for that. Where do you get your news from? If you're the people who are complaining, being like, how come there's no news covering this? What news are they seeing and what is it covering? Because if you're following Western news sources, can you blame a Western news source for covering events in Western countries? I'm in Australia. I'm like, the list of order that I want my news coverage to cover: Australia first, New Zealand second, UK, United States, Canada, France, Germany, Indonesia, I'd chuck on there, China, because they're, right in the backyard, and then, make it up from there on, just improvise. But generally, the news that I'll get will be about other Western countries and the things in my immediate surrounds. Because why do I care about domestic news in, Guadalajara? I do not think I could actually point to Guadalajara on a map. I know it exists. I know the name. Why would I care? It means nothing to me. I care about domestic news. So you cater your own news. Well, at least most people do these days. It's 2019. You cater where you get your news from to suit you. If you aren't subscribed to, the Iraqi national news, the Afghanistan news service, Ukraine Today, unless you're subscribing to these news outlets, you aren't going to be seeing that local news from where they are. Why would you? Why would the ABC be reporting on a local domestic terrorism attack in Iraq? Unless an Australian died in it, you're not going to hear it. There's only a certain amount of column inches that they have, only a certain amount of posts that they can make before it's just, spam and the important news gets drowned out. Another important thing to remember, not everyone uses Facebook. There are whole different social media networks in different countries. China has their own social media network. Russia has their own social media network, and I'm pretty sure that would also apply to like Ukraine, Poland, all the rest of it. Different countries use different social media networks. I can't remember, there's one that's really popular through like Africa, and I've seen it mentioned before, but point is, why are you making the assumption that everybody uses what you make? That's like an incredibly self-centered assumption. It's like, well, everybody is the same that I do. Like, no. Also, what is the point of Facebook dishing you up news? Like, if the only language you speak is English, what is the point of Facebook dishing you up news in Swahili? Or in, like, Pashtun? Or, I don't know, Iraqi, and any other language other than English? No, you're English. You get English news from English sources. So that's basically going to limit the news that you're going to get from the Middle East is going to be Al Jazeera, and that's it, because that's basically the only one that does decent, a decent level of news reporting in English from the Middle East. Al Jazeera. That's it. Unless you follow them, you're going to see almost nothing from the Middle East. And why would you? So the next time you see someone who's going on about, how come no one ever comments on this stuff that's happening in the Middle East, call them out for being bigoted, because it's obviously their fault. Because if they do not follow anyone from Turkey or Afghanistan or the West Bank, then no, they're never going to see any of that news. Ask them why they don't want to see any of that news from the Middle East, and why they have chosen to block it all from their newsfeed. Ask them why they're so bigoted to not have learnt another language. Because, if you can't speak Ukrainian, you're not going to get the Ukrainian news, so why do you hate Ukrainians so much? Let's go to the other side of that. So, that's the whole selection bias part. It's like you select the news that you see, and it's selected to fit you geographically, by language, by relevance. Let's go to the other part of that though, and that's about newsworthiness. If there is a terrorist attack with like major fatalities in a Western country, that is newsworthy. I have pulled up here, and I'm going to link it down in the thing below. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but it is a list of terrorist attacks by country in 2017. The winner of that, Iraq. Number of incidents, 2,466. That's like 8 a day. Do you know how many sunrises there are a day? 1. Do you know how many terrorist attacks there are per day in Iraq? Like 8. Not newsworthy. You are not going to hear about all 2,466 incidents and all 6,476 deaths and 4,900 injuries that happen in Iraq in a year. They would be covering it 8 times a day because it is so fucking frequent. The next winner. Guess, what was that? Afghanistan? You guessed correctly. 1,414. Another 6,000 deaths, so it's obviously a lot more efficient with the killing in Afghanistan because they've been doing it for longer. Next one, Yemen, 966. Pakistan, 719. Who is surprised by that top 4? I am not at all. Next one, Philippines, 692. You know what, let's go back. Pakistan, 719. That is still twice as many terrorist attacks as there are sunrises in a day. They're not going to cover all of the terrorist attacks in Pakistan. It's not newsworthy. Somalia, Nigeria, Nepal with 247. Geez, that's a lot. They really don't like the Chinese, I'm guessing. Syria, India, Egypt, Libya, Turkey, Thailand, Congo, Mali. The UK had 122. You don't hear about all 122 terrorist attacks that occur in the UK anymore, do you? You probably might hear about the 42 people who die, so it's obvious that, you know, only a third of the attacks actually have a fatality, but still, you don't hear about all 122 that occur in the UK. Colombia, Myanmar, Sudan, Kenya, Cameroon, West Bank, US with 65. There's a lot of terrorist attacks in the world. A stupidly large amount. The higher up that list you go, the less likely you are going to hear of these small terrorist attacks. France, 41. Israel, 32. Let's keep on going down this list because I want to find where Australia is. Australia, 4. Yeah, I'm going to hear of all 4 terrorist attacks that occur in 2017. You know what? Can I bring that up? Australia Terrorism 2017. Because was that the... Let me see if I can guess them. It would have been the Linked Cafe one? Australia Terrorism 2017. Timeline of recent terrorist attacks in Australia. That'll do. It'll be a very short list. 2014. Queanbeyan stabbing attacks. 2 teenagers went on a stabbing spree in the town of Queanbeyan, killing one and harming 3 others. Police in New South Wales said one of the teenagers may have had terrorism links. That's not even a proper terrorist attack, is it? We've got a very low bar for terrorism in Australia. Stormed an apartment complex in Brighton, a suburb of Melbourne. 1 woman was shot dead and another held hostage. The gunman was killed after shooting 3 police officers. He repeatedly told police over the phone, "This is for IS, this is for Al-Qaeda." Al-Qaeda and IS are actually fighting against each other, I think, technically. There's a whole complicated thing going on in there, but I bet you the guy was just like, I want to be famous. God, yeah, this is strange. This only lists 2 of them. Oh no, the Link Cafe was in 2014. God, that was so long ago. Anyway, point is, not much terrorism in Australia. When there is an attack, you'll hear about it. When there's 130 people who get killed in Paris, you'll hear about it. You don't hear about terrorist attacks in Iraq. It's not newsworthy. It just won't happen. So, moral of the story. If you're a person who's about to post something being like, well, how come they aren't talking about this subject here? Ask yourself whether you are friends with anyone or follow any pages on Facebook who would have a reason to be talking about it. Because if you're assuming that your friends are going to decide to talk about some random event on the other side of the world for no particular reason other than it happened, you are severely mistaken. Like, it's not going to happen unless you're deciding to make a post, but you're only making a post being like, well, people aren't talking about this other thing. You're only talking about it because people are talking about something else. You're just deflecting. You're trying to distract from it. Anyway, that's been it. Today, moral of the story today, selection bias. Be careful about where you're getting your news from. Be aware of the fact that there will be a bias towards certain areas where that news will affect. That's not a bad thing, because you happen to live in an area and you want to have news that is biased towards things that will affect you. Simple enough to understand, and yet no one seems to understand it. Thanks a lot for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in another ranty video soon. Laters.